Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the celebration of the glorious life of Kaikhosrov D, Iran. The family on stage was a little bit eager and decided to light the candle before they were invited. So I would now like to introduce Kaikhosrov's niece, Zareen, her husband, Richard, their son, Daraz, and their daughter, Delna. And as you can see, they've lit the diva. But there are 4 other candles there, so appreciate that if you could light those also. Also accompanying the family is their cousin Hormuz and their daughter Abba. We will now have the Hambandagi.
For the Ambandagi, what we are going to do is recite the opening passage from Agnavati 1, Ayya Salamanga. And after that, Daraz will read the translation of that passage, and then we will do Yakaviri with the punishing. Okay, so. Can everybody hear me? Yes. Loud. Ayya yasa nemangraha ustana udasto rafedraya mainyos masao orin sardaya asha misteng shotana
In humble adoration, with hands outstretched, I pray to thee, O Master. First of all, through thy Holy Spirit, vouchsafe to me all righteousness of action, all wisdom of the good mind, that I may thereby bring joy to the soul of creation.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again. Less than 4 months before he passed away, Professor Kaikhosrov Irani graced us with his presence on this very stage. A few months prior, Professor Irani and Lavji Kama had organized an all-day religious conference, Zarathustra's Vision and Zoroastrianism Today, where he was one of 4 speakers. Unfortunately, Professor Irani fell ill and was not able to attend. However, we were very keen to hear him, and he too was eager to be with us. So on March 5, 2017, we were fortunate to have him with us. We of course knew that he was not in good health, but he amazed us by speaking for over an hour in his usual, clear, precise, thoughtful, and convincing style. And as always, his personal humanity was so very self-evident. It was an extremely poignant moment in time because of what was left unsaid, but was however uppermost in most of our minds, that in all probability, this would be probably the last time that we at Zagni would see and hear our beloved Professor Irani. And I sense he felt the same way too. This morning you will hear from distinguished speakers about Kaikhoshrov's personal and family life, his university life, his impact on us Zarathustris. I would merely like to quote some of the comments he made on that last day with Zagni. On the topic of justice, let me quote from a sentence of a dastur in the late Sasanian times, Adabat Muraspan. He said to his son, "No human being can look at the face of injustice and not recognize it. Just think about it. Injustice is what we see, and we immediately recognize that this is unjust." His son said, "But there are some people who don't." And he replied, "Yes, there are some. That is because their mind has been clouded by fear or greed." This profound notion is the notion of ethics in social and worldly relations. When asked about Bahumana, it is the comprehension of the true nature of what is going on. Bahumana, for example, does not involve doing mathematics. It is an understanding of Asha which applies to the lives of human beings and is in the good mind that is honest. We all have it. When asked, what message of Zarathustra can we provide to our children in their context and their times? He said, just the simplest prayers. If we understand the Shema, you are doing the right thing for the right reason. If you feel that, your life will be good. But always pause and seek if it is the right thing. The Bahumana recognizes it quickly. Near the end of his talk, Professor Irani said, "Educate all, inspire all to live justice and compassion." And then he said, "Live your life with all the honesty you can and with all the inspiration that Zarathustra's teachings can give you. But let it be at the level of inspired existence that Zarathustra has provided." As the professor was leaving that day, he was stopped numerous times along the way out by well-wishers wishing adieu. When he was finally seated in the car, I held his hand and said, "Professor, thank you so very much for coming. it meant a great deal to all of us. And he replied, "No, thank everyone. I really wanted to do this." I waited and saw the car leave till I could see it no longer. Indeed, it was a glorious life. Indeed, certainly, and in deeds. Thank you. I would now like to invite on stage Zareen and Darius Wheel.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming here today to remember Kaikhosrov. Thank you, Astad, the ZAGNI board, and all who worked to plan this tribute. I am Zareen Wheel. Kaikhosrov, who was called Keku by his family, was my mother's first cousin. My maternal grandfather, Changir Setna, and Keku's mother, Mithibai, were brother and sister. Now, it might sound a little strange to you if I called him Keku, but that's how I always knew him, so that's how I'm going to refer to him today. My early connection to Keku when I was a child in Bombay was as the relative who was a professor of philosophy in New York, whom I thought looked a little bit like Leon Trotsky, who seemed to know something about everything, and who visited his elderly mother Mithufui, my great aunt, with Piroja every year. Somewhere at the start of their Bombay visit, I would go to their flat at Kambala Hill with my grandparents and mother, anticipating orange squash, cookies, and an hour or so of being entertained by Keku talking about his students, his travels, how his lectures had been received at the latest conference he'd been to, and his fascinating discussions with people he'd met. Before they returned to New York, Keku and Piroja would reciprocate by visiting my grandparents, and it would be a family reunion of sorts, where again, the conversation covered a variety of topics, for each of which Keku would have a captivating illustration or anecdote to make his point. He seemed to have a bottomless trove of stories. Only much later, when Keku and Piroja became a very important part of my family in the US, did I see that what made Keku unique was not just his Sherazade-like talents. The stories that are told about someone as beloved, celebrated, and long-lived as Keku inevitably become stories one has heard before. So I ask for your indulgence if you already know some of what I'm going to say. When Keku was only around 2 years old, his father, Dinsha Irani, took ill and had to undergo risky surgery in Europe. Wanting to leave his infant son his legacy in case he didn't survive, he wrote letters for him. He told him to stand for the principles of righteous behavior, but to always remember never to hurt anyone. He told him, "My hope for you is that you will become a good servant of the community." His father recovered and resumed his law practice in Bombay. He was the most influential figure in Keku's life. When Keku was a schoolboy, around 10 or 11 years old, he would go from St. Xavier's School to his father's law office at Mullah and Mullah and wait for him to finish work so they could drive home together. During these drives, his father would present an idea to him and ask him to formulate his own thoughts on it. As Keku himself described, he was basically charged with saying something intelligent on any number of subjects. During this period, he was exposed to the Gathas. Dinsha Irani would recite Gothic verses, and their poetic effect made a powerful impression on his young son. From an early age, Keku was good with children. His cousin, Roshan Sevna, whom some of you might have met when she visited Keku and Piroja in New York, is 15 years younger than Keku. She remembers that when she was very little, Keku's younger brother Farouk would tease her relentlessly. She would take refuge in Keku's room, where he would comfort her by playing music for her on his gramophone. Music was Keku's lifelong passion. The Zagny family has seen firsthand Keku's love for children, his remarkable ability to make them feel as important as any adult, his kindness toward them, and the delight with which he would converse with them. Keku graduated from college with a degree in chemistry. He became interested in physics on his own. He wanted to pursue graduate work in the US, but those were the years of the Second World War, and traveling abroad was not feasible. So to bide his time, he got a degree in law and clerked at his father's old law firm. According to his cousin Roshan, he was not really interested in the law and would spend his time at the office writing papers on physics and math. He would use red ink so they wouldn't get mixed up with the firm's papers. Law school failed Keku in that the courses did not address the bigger question in his mind: how the structure of law organizes social existence. The tedium of resolving the headachy disputes of clients felt like drudgery. And yet, I think everyone here knows the best thing that ever happened to Keku happened at the law firm. According to him, Piroja was the only one who was interested in his other interests. Fortunately, one of Piroja's strengths was that she was an excellent listener. In 1946, Keku got his chance to leave for America. His cousins Jamshed Sevna, who was 12 at the time, and Noshir Sevna, then a 6-year-old, recall going to Victoria Terminus Station with the rest of the family to see him off on a train to Calcutta, from where he was to board a ship to the west coast of the United States. With the war only recently over, means of travel abroad was still pretty limited. Keku worked with Fermi and Oppenheimer on the Manhattan Project at the University of Chicago. He used to relate how after Fermi taught him to properly clean lab equipment, his experiments became more successful. Later, at the Institute of Advanced Studies at Princeton, he got to know Albert Einstein. He was absorbed by the writings of Sir Arthur Eddington and Kant. He was becoming interested in philosophy of science. Looking back on those years, he said, I was interested in what the human enterprise leads to, and when one asks this, one is likely to be a philosopher. He applied for a position as lecturer in philosophy of science at City College, New York. One of his favorite stories was about how a hastily scribbled reference letter by Einstein clinched the position for him and got him a 50-cent raise on the hourly salary. He was a master teacher who made an impact on hundreds and hundreds of students over 6 decades. The academic track that he self-deprecatingly described as random also spoke to his breadth of intellect. New York City of the late 40s and early 50s fed Keku's soul. The Metropolitan Opera was like a stomping ground. To the list of luminaries who had crossed his path, he added the opera divas Eleanor Stibor and Patrice Munsell, who became close friends. Back to Piroja and 1953, when they were married. Keku's cousin, Noshir Setna, was 13 when he attended the wedding at Fasli Agyari in Bombay. He recalls that after the ceremony was over and guests were awaiting lunch, Keku regaled them with stories of his experiences during the past 7 years in America. The wedding guests heard about how he had talked to his students about Zoroastrianism, and specifically the significance of the Homer plant in rituals. After class, a few of his students wanted to know how they might become Zoroastrians. This narrative must have sounded rather radical to more guests than 13-year-old Noshir. Among the love stories I have witnessed, Keiko and Piroja's long marriage might be one of the most devoted and tender. One felt a kind of appreciation in their company, a gratitude for what they represented. Keiko loved talking about Piroja. He spoke of her with enormous affection, respect, and admiration. He considered their relationship to be a true sharing of life, a deep bond that he said couldn't be expressed in ordinary words. Piroja gave him unstinting support, and he realized it. His life with Piroja brought him what he described as inner peace, tranquility, and happiness. She made the heaviest burdens bearable for him. In the last couple of months, while trying to sort through Keiko's papers at his apartment, everywhere there's evidence of Keiko the thinker and extraordinary teacher. He jotted his reflections on ethics, probability, justice, religious thought, in pen and ink, on random pieces of paper, the back of a flyer, the reverse of an envelope. I wish I could ask him what possessed him to note grades with Gujarati alphabet characters on a stack of student papers, graded on time but not returned before the end of class. Maybe it was a way to slog through the pile. A Gujarati curl minus, curl being the first letter of the alphabet, for an A minus. Keiko lived Zarathustra's injunction: decide with a clear mind how you will live and act. He had no use for ideology or dogma. He was genuinely interested in what others thought. He was always gracious, kind, and generous. No matter how old and tired he might have been, he always agreed to write the article, the foreword, or the speech that so many publications and organizations would request. Keiko had a delightfully ironic sense of humor, a humility, integrity, and a goodness of character. He had the ability to always be reasonable, pleasant, and wise. When infirmity and loss took their toll, he demonstrated grace and never complained. He represented the finer aspects of humanity. I was asked to speak about Keiko from the family perspective, but Keiko was a member of many families. His family of origin, his close college family, his Zagny family, his greater Zoroastrian community family, and his extended academia family. George, Jeff, Chester, from Rosanarmiti, Lavji and Meru, Dr. Daraz and Hilla. You shared your friendship with him, stocked his fridge, brought him his favorite lasagna and rubber. Thank you especially for being like family to him. To close, I will leave you with the observations of my daughter Delna, who when she was 10 years old, nominated Keiko for the Best Relative Award. I quote, "He tells really good jokes. He is very funny and dramatic. Sometimes he even sings opera to entertain us. He is kind, considerate, caring, loving, treats everyone respectfully and equally, and he helps me with things I don't understand. Superb is the kind of person he is. How fortunate we are that this exceptional person was a part of our lives. Thank you.
I'm Darius Wheel. You just heard from my mom. I've been alive for less than 1/3 of Keku's lifetime. He knew me since the day I was born. When my sister Della and I were growing up in Chicago, Keku and Baroja often visited our family. They slept on a pull-out sofa in my mother's home office. Della and I were so excited to see them that every morning we'd ease the door open and tiptoe into their bedroom. Sometimes we'd hide Keku's slippers under the bed or just stare in wonder at his sleeping face. I was fascinated by the sharp geometry of his beard and the enormous forehead that protected an even bigger brain. Having Keku in our house felt like we were hosting a medieval wizard. Was it really true that even Keku needed to sleep? Yes. And even Keku could sense when a giddy 6-year-old was peering over him at 6:30 in the morning. He'd wake up and greet me and my sister, then nod back off to sleep. Baroja would turn to us and whisper, "What are you doing? Go back to bed." On those visits, there were two main things I looked forward to. Every day, Keku invited me on a stroll to 7-Eleven, where he'd buy me Mentos mints. On the short walk back to our house, we'd carefully and deliberately eat them. Each time Keku put one in his mouth, he'd pause in the middle of the sidewalk and lift his hand in approval. I most looked forward to the moments when Keku asked if I wanted him to read aloud to me. There was a 500-page book with a blue and orange dust jacket that I was weirdly obsessed with. At the time, I didn't know that the book was a commentary on the biblical story of Job. I just liked the colors. Keku would happily put me on his lap and begin to read. Keku was one of the most important teachers and elders in my life. He encouraged my interests in classical music and the world of ideas by taking me to concerts, giving me books, and engaging me in conversation. When I was in college, I often traveled from Boston to New York so that I could go to the opera with Keku or accompany him to a lecture. For the last 4 years, I've lived about 70 blocks north of Keku. He stopped going to concerts a few years ago, but he enthusiastically welcomed me to his apartment whenever I wanted to drop by. We talked about history, philosophy, politics, and often I would just listen as Keku told me stories about the hundreds of characters who peopled his life. Keku's many generations of students know what a masterful teacher he was, how captivating he could be, as well as generous and comforting. He was a very civil man. I hope that I can become more like him. Thank you.
I'd like to now invite up Professor Jeff Rosen to provide us with a university perspective.
Thank you all for this opportunity to talk with you about Katie and his professional home at the City College of New York. As you know, he lived in for the last 6 decades. It's an institution that he cherished and that revered him in turn. I've chosen today to talk with you primarily about his considerable gifts as an educator, and I've done so for several reasons. To begin with, Zagny itself has prepared, in anticipation of this memorial service, a commendable job of assembling a summary of Katie's scholarly record, together with a listing of his honors and his history of service to the City College. For any of you who want to go further, Google is just a click away, and you will find a considerable list of things pertaining to Katie's scholarship on Google. More importantly, most, if not all of you, have had the experience and privilege of being the beneficiary of Katie's teaching skills. And because of his presence in your life, you may have become just a bit smarter and wiser than you might have otherwise thought imaginable. At some point, I'm sure, many of you have begun to realize the magnitude of the gift he bestowed and sought to express your gratitude to him. That sense of gratitude was reflected in a thoughtful letter sent by the president of City College this July, announcing Katie's death to the college-wide community. Let me just quote a bit from the letter. The letter begins as follows. It is with great sadness that I share with the City College community that in the last days of June, we lost one of our true treasures, Kaikhosrov D, Irani, KD to virtually everyone who knew him, left so deep a mark on City College that it is hard to know where to begin. Skipping ahead, the letter goes on to state, a sure way to inspire an animated and affectionate discussion among the group of alumni is to ask if any of them had studied with Professor Irani. So beloved was he in the classroom. There are lots of ways that teachers would like to be remembered and commemorated, but the affection and excitement of generations of students, emotions that Dr. Irani excited for the entire duration of his storied career, is about as rare a prize as any of us can hope to achieve. Close quotes. I've personally witnessed those sentiments expressed by Katie's students over the years. My observations took place in two very different contexts. The first occurred naturally enough simply as a function of our friendship over a long period of time and the fact that we enjoyed one another's company. Whether we found ourselves together at the college, walking on Broadway, or having lunch together somewhere in his neighborhood, it was not at all unusual to encounter someone who would approach and say, Professor Irani, you may not remember me, but I was in your class some time ago. And I just wanted to say hello and thank you personally for providing me with one of my most valuable college experiences. The sincerity and appreciativeness displayed was always spontaneous, palpable, and heartfelt. The second set of circumstances occurred in the classroom itself. Over the years, I've had the good fortune to co-teach several advanced seminars with Katie, typically involving our shared interest in the workings of the human mind. Permit me a brief aside in order to put our co-teaching activities in some context. I'm a research psychologist by training, not a philosopher. I was hired by City College some time ago to create a graduate program in an area called human neuropsychology, an area within the cognitive sciences dedicated to advancing our collective understanding of the relationship of a person's mind and brain. It seeks to do so by studying the impact of specific changes in the brain on the thoughts and experiences of the person so affected. The students I trained also sought to understand those changes in ways that might ultimately benefit the person so affected. Katie came to this topic having shared in and having contributed to philosophy's long-standing interest in the relationship of mind, body, and consciousness. Katie brought to these issues his own unique blend of rational inquiry, phenomenology, and a signature formulation on the domains of belief. With that said, and given our fondness for one another, we would frequently find ourselves in conversation about our respective views on the workings of the human mind, often enough using one another as a sounding board for our latest musing on the topic. Occasionally, these conversations would give rise to a set of seemingly interrelated specific issues we both felt worthy of further, more systematic inquiry. At some point, we might agree, among other things, to develop a seminar and invite interested students to join us in a shared exploration. In the classroom, Katie was exactly the person you have experienced and thus can well imagine. He was first and foremost respectful of the student, the subject matter, and our shared goal of both broadening and deepening our students' understanding of how the mind might work. Overlaid on all of this was Katie's expressed desire to enable our students to more fully appreciate the workings of their own mind, and thus what they themselves could conceive of and ultimately seek to achieve. Katie would invariably approach our shared goal in a fashion similar to the way in which an expert guide assists those in their care explore a new terrain, enabling them to see what they otherwise might have missed, as well as catch a glimpse of what might be just over the horizon. His guidance typically entailed providing the student with a clear sense of the ground they were about to cover, a set of analytic tools that would eventually enable them to, with appropriate assistance, make the key discovery themselves. I would witness most every student at some point during the semester experience that aha moment, the moment in which they came to discern something of genuine value to themselves. Those feelings and insights that Katie promoted through his teaching provided students with a sense of wonder about their discovery, as well as about themselves. A sense in which they had come to realize just how perceptive, how astute, and capable they might just be. And that was the key gift that Katie imparted, the gift that they would remember, so that sometime later, perhaps on some occasion when Katie and I were walking down Broadway, someone might approach and begin to say, "Professor Irani, you may not remember me, but..."
I'd now like to welcome Professor George Green to give us a student's perspective. Like many of his university colleagues, George was also a very good friend, and I understand the professor's 90th birthday was celebrated at his home.
I know I have a very loud voice. I was fortunate to enter a class. I was fortunate to enter a class entitled The Philosophy of Science in the spring term of 1957. It was an evening class that was being taught by Professor Irani. He had been a professor at the school only a few years, having come to City College from Princeton's Institute for Advanced Studies, which, of course, was headed by Albert Einstein. Years later, I was Professor Einstein who helped him get his position as a teacher at City College. Einstein actually wrote, and you heard from Zareen before, recommending Irani so that the note got him a slightly higher rate of pay, 50 cents an hour more than most starting professors. This was a story Professor Irani loved to tell. I assume most of the people in this room knew it and heard it many times before. With his upper-class British accent and manners, and with his enthusiasm, accented by his very lively, flashing eyes, his performance in the classroom was mesmerizing. What he said was engrossing. How he spoke was inspiring. The only thing I knew at that point in time about the philosophy of science had come to me from reading science fiction stories. I was not a good science student, and in fact had been a failure at school up until that time. Very soon, none of that mattered. Professor Irani had inspired me and gotten me interested in the academic discipline of philosophy. I was converted from my previous vocational objective of becoming a medical doctor. That was what my mother wanted me to be. I was enchanted. And so at age 18, I gave up the medical profession and became a philosophy student. Under Professor Irani's guidance and tutelage, I registered and completed a total of 8, maybe 9 philosophy courses. I became president of the then newly formed City College Philosophy Society, of which he was the faculty advisor. It was because of him that I was able to turn my academic record, which was dismal until that time, completely around. Because of him, I was able to become an honest student in the philosophy department. My aim at that time became to emulate this incredible man and become a professor of philosophy, just like him. Professor Irani was a physicist and a chemist, and of course, having worked under Albert Einstein in Princeton, he was very accomplished. He was also, as obviously you all know, an expert in Asian religious philosophy, particularly Zoroastrian teachings. Of course, you all know that because of his legendary interest and work writing about the Zoroastrian teachings and Zoroastrian philosophy. His great-grandfather, he told me, had escaped from Iran and went to Bombay in the middle of the night to escape treatment of the Iranian mullahs of the time. His father was the same expert in religious philosophy, but died early when Professor Irani was only 16 years old. His father was a lawyer, as you heard, with a very successful practice. By the time of World War II, K.D. Irani was also a lawyer. He had been admitted to the Indian High Court in Bombay in 1945, where, as I found out 50 years later, he met his wife, Prof, also a lawyer who was working in the same law firm as he at the time. The story about his romance with his Perosian brought tears to his eyes when he told it to me about 60 years later. It brought tears to my eyes too. It was during that time that I also took a philosophy course with him in the philosophy of law. And perhaps as a result, instead of becoming a philosophy professor, I became a lawyer. And I went on to have a successful law-related career. It was during the past 7 years that KD, as I came to call him, and I became reacquainted. The reacquainting was fortuitous because I attended the 50th anniversary of my graduation from City College. It was June 2010, and I was astounded at the time to discover that he was still teaching. I believe he had the longest career of any teacher in the history of the City College. We started to see each other regularly. I would go to his apartment and listen to him, prompted by questions that I would ask about his history, about his family, and about his writings. I was retired by this time, and it was a great benefit to me to be able to listen to that beautiful voice express those profound thoughts that still inspired me. I began to read philosophy with him again, and he gave me what amounted to private lessons, private lectures. I brought him into the 21st century, or so I thought, by helping him try to negotiate the cyber war. He got a computer at my urging and registered on Facebook with my help. We started to keep his financial records on the computer, but he couldn't type, so I became his helper. One very wonderful, special Irani private lecture I got was a result of his receiving a Facebook email from some other professor whom Katie told me was an expert in Platonic philosophy at Plato. When her email came in, I said to him, well, let's answer it. And he said, oh, no, don't answer. And I asked why. He explained that this person had wanted him to help her write about Plato's knowledge of Zoroaster. I questioned him further about how Plato knew about Zoroaster. And he launched into a lecture on Platonic philosophy for me alone. A lecture that proved that Plato knew all about Zoroaster. This was typical of our afternoon together. I always had a very good time when I went to his apartment. Katie was always astounded that so many students stayed in contact with him. This modest man did not understand the depth of help and love he gave to the young people that he taught during his career. His influence on so many was testified to by the many letters that were received on the occasion of a faculty service award presented to him at City College in 2012. I have some of the letters here in this book if anybody wants to look at them later, but now I'll read you just one. Dear Professor Irani, I was very fortunate to have renewed our acquaintance over these past 2 years. I am happy to be involved with you at this time of our lives and to feel that we have become friends. Almost 60 years ago, in 1957, I registered for your evening class in the philosophy of science. I knew nothing about the subject matter, but I was interested at the time in attempting to resolve troubling conflicts in my own thought processes. I was a scholastically failing teenager at the time. I had entered CCNY the year before at the age of 16. My mother wanted me to study pre-med and become a doctor, but I had no discipline for study of any kind at that time. I was a non-matriculated student because, although I had been admitted to CCNY the year before, I had received only failing or near failing grades in every course I had taken up until that time. And I had been discharged from the college because of poor performance. I was permitted only to take night courses until I could become readmitted based on more worthy academic results. first person in my college career that inspired me to believe that I might not be the academic failure I had been up until that time. Your excitement about your subject matter and enthusiasm were contagious. As a result, from that time on, I was a philosophy major. I went on to have a successful college career, taking many philosophy courses, both with you and other professors in the philosophy department, as well as other various liberal arts courses. And I graduated with my liberal arts degree in 1960, and even with honors in philosophy. Incredible. I always knew that you had been the catalyst that saved my academic life. Over the years, as I had successes in my post-college life, both academically and in my career, I always knew that my confidence in my abilities was first learned as a result of being in your classes. I was never the best of philosophy students. There were many better and more talented than me. But my ability to comprehend the difficult and subtle ideas that I learned as a student at CCNY continued to give me confidence in my intellect and in my self-worth. I learned that I could be successful if I took the time to think. You taught me that thinking was the best of things and the most reliable activity. I still believe that today. The fact that you are still available to me after almost 50 years is astounding. When I found out that you were still teaching and that I could spend time with you again, it was an opportunity that I wanted to grab hold of. I again feel that spark of excitement that I first experienced as your student during those years. It's wonderful. I want to thank you for being who you are to me. I changed the direction of my life because of what I learned from you and because of you. And it wasn't the subject matter so much as the realization of my ability that you helped me uncover, starting with that very first class in 1957. You have let me into your life, and I appreciate that very much. I look forward to helping you chronicle your accumulated writings and perhaps being catalyst for you, as you were for me so many years ago. I think the world deserves a book about the philosophy of civilization from Katie Irani, so I'm ready to help you make it happen with great affection.
We now have a video presentation of the professor's life.
Good morning, everybody. Professor Irani, he was not only a scholar, philosopher, writer, intellect, he was more than that. And I had the great honor and opportunity when Zagny and Ustad had asked me to come up with developing a memorial film on his life. Now, how do you condense 90 plus years into maybe 15 minutes? It was a daunting task because he led such a full life and he had so many accolades and memories that he shared with everyone, both in public and in private. And so what you're going to see today is a 30-minute film, and I hope you guys will be able to sit through, and I think you will, because it really represents him not only as a scholar, like I said, but as a humanitarian, and as a husband, and as a son. And you will see a more rounded man who touched so many people's lives. And I recall when I first met him as a preteen at a Gatha conference, like Darius had said, we kind of looked at him like he was the grand wizard of the Harry Potter movie. and we were kind of nervous talking to him. And it wasn't until many years later, when I was an undergrad student, that I had the opportunity to have a conversation with him about what I was planning on pursuing as a college student, and his impact on me to decide what life path I was going to take has still been with me. And I have a great deal of respect, and he is honored today, and I'm proud to say that I hope that he will approve of what we have presented today. And I just want to say, let's go on with the show. Thank you.
My father had a very serious illness, and the doctors in India said that the kidney required to be removed in a particular way, and they were not prepared to perform that operation in India. And there was a specialist in Paris who performed this surgery. So he went with his friend, Dr. Gilder, who had been his school friend, and my mother, of course, and they went to Paris where the surgery was performed. But on the way they had said that his chance of survival was about 50-50. I was 2 years old then, and he felt that he should leave some instructions in case he did not live for me. So he took a book, very nicely, beautifully leather bound with gold embossed and so on, and wrote letters to me. Well, he survived, but I had the book, I still have the book, and I read it, and he had hopes for me. And he said, my hope for you is that you will become a good servant of the community. I've tried to do that. And whenever I'm asked to discuss something, present something, I never say no, because I remember this. He also said that I should stand for the principles of righteous behavior, but always remember not to hurt someone. Let no one say that here was someone who hurt me. And that was when I was chairman of my department for 9 years. That was hard. But I had to maintain the integrity of the department, fair treatment and so on. At the same time, I did my best for the person to feel that this was not something that should cause him hurt. But people were hurt. So these things have molded me very, very deeply. Well, that's the...
Other than your father, who was the most influential person in your life?
I think my mother.
Tell us about her. How did she influence you?
My mother was considerably younger than my father, and she was widowed early in life, and she lived a long life. She was a very able woman, a person who did things, a very firm personality and character. My father was mild and gentle. My mother was a very powerful person. One day I was discussing at the dinner table my readings in ethics and so on, and I presented the well-known view of utilitarianism, which is that to be moral is to maximize satisfaction and minimize dissatisfaction. And this is how we put it today. In the original, it was maximize pleasure and minimize pain. And my father had passed away at that time. There were my aunts, my mother, my brother. And my mother asked, "What is this that you're discussing?" I said, "This is ethics. Your general life should be such that you maximize pleasure for yourself and for others and minimize pain." And she said, "What has pleasure and pain got to do with ethics?"
I pray you'll be alright and watch us where we go and help us to be wise in times when we don't know.
What was the story of the first job offer that you received here in the United States, and how you received a pay raise before even starting that job?
Well, actually, I had been doing some research work, and my interest moved into philosophy of science, and I was hoping to get some position teaching that subject. And such a position opened up at the City College of New York, and a friend of mine talked to Professor Wiener, the late Professor Wiener. Now he passed away about 3 or 4 years ago. And I went to see him, and he said that he would give me a job, but I hadn't had any experience teaching philosophy. I had been, when I was in India, I was a teaching fellow in physical chemistry, but that had nothing to do with this. And so he asked me if I could get some recommendations. And I had attended some seminars at Columbia, and I had those instructors write recommendations. And I was in Princeton at that time. And I had met Professor Einstein on several occasions, 2 or 3 occasions. And as I was leaving and coming to New York, I met him and I wished him goodbye. And he said, "What are you going to be doing?" And I said, "Well, there is a possibility of a job in teaching philosophy of science." And he knew my interest in the subject. We had talked about it, at least on one occasion, in some detail. And I said, "But I don't have adequate recommendations." And so he pulled up a pad and wrote down that he knew me and that he knew that I was interested in the subject, and he thought that I would make a good teacher, and signed Albert Einstein, tore the page and gave it to me. And more or less instantly I went to the station, took the train, and came to New York and went to see Professor Wiener. And I said, I have this recommendation from Albert Einstein. He said, really, from Albert Einstein? I said, yes, there it is. And he looked at it and he said, well, good. You start 2 weeks from now. And the opening salary at that time for an adjunct lecturer was $4.25 an hour. And he said, now that you have a recommendation from Einstein, I'll raise your salary to $4.75 an hour. I had a 50-cent raise. And that was worthwhile. I didn't have much time, but I wanted to go back to Princeton and thank Einstein for it, but I never had the opportunity. And that was the last meeting I had with him. I really have no clear insight into this, and then I had fellowship in physical chemistry.
Okay.
And then I became interested in physics more or less on my own, and I did attend some lectures and so on. And the person who really shifted my attention to philosophy of science was Sir Arthur Eddington. I think I read some of his books over and over again and was completely absorbed by it.
While you were losing your interest in law, practicing law, you were beginning to gain interest in something else there.
I know what you are getting at.
Would you tell us about it?
Well, my wife at that time, the person who was to become my future wife, was also working in that law firm. And we came in contact with each other. There were cases we worked on together. And I found something very interesting, that she had an extraordinarily rapid intuition into legal resolutions or the ultimate legal ends. I had to look up references here and there, how would this be interpreted and so on. And on several occasions I found that what the conclusion I came to after days of work, she had come to in 5 minutes. And I began to realize that perhaps I'm a little dull in the area, and also that she is very bright. The strange thing was that she couldn't really give me the exact line of argument by which she came to that conclusion. And so we talked and we exchanged our ideas, and she was about the only person who was interested in these other things which I had in mind. I really don't know how much she was really interested in, but she was ready to listen to me. And she listened to me at some considerable length. And then we mutually respected each other and loved each other. And finally, we married each other.
And you've been married together?
Now it's been 35 years. No, 45 years. 45 years. I missed 10. And it has been really a true sharing of life, which has made an enormous difference to me. It has been enormously supportive. And a considerable amount of inner peace, tranquility, and happiness has come to me through that.
From the very little contact that I've had with her, I've come to realize that she's a very quiet person.
Yes. I think that is accurate, unless she is aroused.
Then the lawyer comes out.
There have been times once she was tricked and cheated by somebody in the law firm. And when she was sure of that, she gave that person an unbelievable dressing down.
Mm-hmm.
So that happens, but that's not part of her personality.
Have you been ever the recipient?
There have been occasions when she has
deservedly
repudiated me, but always very kindly. Always very kindly, but sometimes very firmly, yes.
What is the secret of living with someone for 45 years and still being in love?
Well, we are. I think it has been that very deep sharing of our lives, and the fact that she knows what I am aspiring to or what I want, and she gives me unstinting support, even without my asking for anything. She does that, and I realize it. And so there is this bond which I really cannot express in ordinary words, but it is a very deep one. And then we personally, each one of us, regards the other with very deep affection. This is love, and it is utterly non-demanding.
When you walk through a storm, hold your head up high and don't be afraid of the dark. At the end of a storm,
I have an interest in what it is that the human enterprise leads to. And this, when one asks such a question, one is likely to be a philosopher. What is it that gives a point to my existence? I came into this world without a personal option. I have a certain body, I have a certain location, I live in it, and in due course I shall die. What is the point of this whole thing? And this produces what we call religion. Freedom can be eroded by major technological changes. For example, the techniques by which one can invade the privacy of individuals can be extraordinary. That has already happened. Techniques which can change the conditions of social interaction. For example, these computer technologies now make the presence of people working in an office environment more or less important, shall we say. In the old days, proximity was extremely important. I recall about 50 years ago, there was a tremendous competition for space for business offices in the Wall Street area of New York. People had to be present in law offices, in financial offices, and so on. And they wanted to be near each other so that if there were conferences to be arranged, it could be arranged in 5 or 10 minutes. Today, all that has disappeared. And people can sit in various places, locations with these gadgets and communicate with each other. And some people actually stay at home and do the work. So what sort of a social structure are we going to be facing in the near future? We have to look at this and the implications of that for human livelihood. And I want people to become clear. I think this is one of the major functions of philosophy. Unfortunately, the teachers of science and the teachers of religion themselves are imperialistic, and they claim that their beliefs cover everything, and that's the danger.
And the domains have no way of intermeshing into each other.
If we can, this is the task for the future.
To bring them together.
Well, we can't combine them, but we can arrange things in such a way that there is no conflict.
And are there areas of commonality?
There will be overlaps here and there, yes, there will be, particularly in technology, which will have overlaps. Even religion, religious ritual is frequently viewed as technology. In the old days it was. We have no rain. Well, let's have this prayer for rain.
So it was a technique to apply which would end in bringing rain.
Right.
The end of that process was rain.
That's right. And to end the drought which the lack of rain had caused.
Isn't that what people do a lot of times in prayers? I pray for
this, I pray for
health,
that, for
wealth,
my health,
for winning the lottery.
Exactly, exactly. And in that case then, they have extended religion into technology.
Or they've turned religion actually to become nothing more than technology.
I hope there's something more than that. But when they do that, then it should be judged by technology. You have to judge, does it work or not? And if it doesn't work, then we would say it's just bad technology. This is what I ask you to, the way to look at the world. Look at the world as a moral conflict, as an ideal, a perfect something which became flawed, and you see conflict all around you. Are you prepared to look at it that way? And certainly it's very easy to look at human life, social existence that way. And I have made my commitment. It took me some years to become clear about it. But I do view this, and I do view that it is possible to minimize it, and it is conceivable that we can have a fully harmonious society. This is what I presented at the World Parliament of Religions in 1993, I think. But we're looking at the world not through a clear-cut glass, but through pieces of glass, through which we have different foci, different pictures, which cause a certain kind of discomfort. But the moment we understand what the situation is, we can be rendered comfortable. And I think philosophic insight ultimately will do that.
And that understanding is to understand that these are different pieces of glass?
That's right.
Not that the world is incomprehensible?
No, no. The world is, well, that's my assumption. We are capable of understanding the world. When, how, to what extent, I don't know. It presents grave difficulties to us. In science, in ethics, can we construct a society in which all the significant values will be maximized? I hope so, but I don't know. Do we have the intelligence to do it? And once we have some grasp, shall we have the will to do it? I don't know.
And that is what wisdom is?
Yes. Yes, be human without getting yourself committed to some this or that ideology or this or that tradition. Be open, be rational, and accept the humanity of others and be human. It's not difficult.
So for those who may not know it, I want you to recognize that today is indeed a special occasion because you all are in the presence of a legend.
There is a famous line in the Gospels. Happiness to him who brings happiness to others. A profound line. This develops later into what we call compassion. You must personally have compassion in human relations. Otherwise, life becomes unpleasant. So, with this too, in the social order, justice above all, in the personal relationship, compassion, and this is the essence of the belief system. All you need to do is to commit yourself to a life of goodness. That is all that service should deny.
How would you like to be remembered?
As a good man, a thoughtful man, one who was not reluctant to serve his fellow human beings as in the area in which he could contribute, to reflect, to expound the teachings which I have received and which I have thought about. And if in doing this I have made people happy, let them remember that I did make them feel happy.
A true member of the human race.
I hope so. I hope so. Because humanity is something institutionally dear to me.
Professor Kaikhosrov Irani, a true human being. It's been a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. I was happy to be here.
They will be speaking on KDI Mazda Abra's Tattva.
Can you hear me? Yes. Zareen, Darius, Delna, Richard, and all the esteemed friends of Kaikhosrov, I am both humbled and honored to pay respect to a righteous individual, like of which I have never known and met in this life. I am truly blessed to have known Kaikhosrov D Irani, whose impact on my life was profound and intense. I will make an effort to summon the life of a valued helper of Mazda Aura. One of the stanzas of Gatha, Yashna 31.22, was favorite of Kaikhosrov's. Clear is all to this man of wisdom as to the man who carefully thinks. He who upholds the truth with all the might of his power, he who upholds the truth to the utmost in his word and deed, he indeed is thy valued helper, O Mazda Aura. Kaikhosrov had reached a level and a height in this life that he could have started a movement, or as some unfairly characterize Kaikhosrov as a proponent, advocate, and a champion of Gatha cult. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Nothing could be farther from the truth. He never saw himself as a leader. He never asked anybody to follow him. KDI's life was devoid of abhiman or false pride. Let me recall a popular bhajan or a hymn which was favorite of Mahatma Gandhi. Par dukhe upkar kare toye man abhiman na aane re. That means that a truly religious individual is the one who helps those who are in the dire need without letting a pride enter his mind. His message, repeating the message of Prophet, was be truthful in your words and deeds. The word I was not in his vocabulary. The word I repeat, was not in his vocabulary. KDI was a great communicator. His language was similar to Gandhiji, plain and simple. He knew his audience well. Many a times his audience would be very young Zoroastrian kids. One of the basic prayers of ours, Yathaho Velyo, written in a language which is not spoken and understood by Zarathustri kids and ladies, either in India or in America. It was so amazing to see Kitty explain the prayer equivalent of the Lord's Prayer of the Christian faith to kids. His power of persuasion and control over the language was simply amazing, truly amazing. I recall one such incident when Fazana's application came before the UNESCO for recognition of NGO. We, Kaikhosrov, Laudikama and myself represented Fazana. Our application was slated for discussion around 10:30. It was almost 11:50 and no sign whether our application will be heard. Lo and behold, the presiding officer called the KDI to make a short presentation. He spoke for about 5 minutes, and in spite of the opposition of Muslim countries, the chairman intervened and said, petition approved. The committee which approved Fazana's application consisted of the representatives of Cuba, Ireland, and of course India. I want to emphasize that the chairman, a representative from Cuba, spoke highly of the Zoroastrian community and Zoroastrian religion. He had done his homework very well. Another praiseworthy quality of this helper of Mazda, Aura, was tolerance, religious and personal. He never believed that what I say and what I know is only true and others are wrong. He justly believed that like a bee gathering honey from the different flowers, the wise one accepts the essence of the different scriptures and sees only the good in all religions. This is a quotation from Bhagavad Gita. Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore writes in the introduction of Divine Songs of Zarathustra by Katie's esteemed father, late Dinsha J. Irani. That the prophet Zarathustra was the first among the men whose message was not borrowed from the books or received from the teachers. Zarathustra was the first prophet who emancipated religion from exclusive narrowness of the tribal god, the god of the chosen people, and offered it to the universal man. Truly, KDI was a helper of the prophet. Time and again, he emphasized to those who are willing to listen to make a declaration that I am a Master Yasni according to Zarathustra. Thus, I solemnly declare my faith, and I solemnly believe in good thoughts, well conceived, believe in good words, well spoken, and good deeds, well done. He was not a political person. He was neither a liberal, nor conservative, nor orthodox. He was a righteous Zarathustri. He was a righteous Zarathustri. He rightly believed that those who praise their own doctrines and disparage the doctrines of others do not solve any problems. This is from Jainism. Kaikhosrov was not a Zoroastrian priest. He was not a Pramukh Swami. He was not a Paramulaji. He was not a bishop or a cardinal or a patriarch. Like Pope Francis, he used to say, who am I to judge? He would say, who am I to judge? He was very reluctant to judge people. The only thing Kaikhosrov wanted to emphasize was the ethical and the moral principles of good and evil, freedom of choice, and the responsibility for one's actions through one's thoughts, words, and deeds. I can speak only for the Patel dynasty. We were fortunate and honored that we knew both Piroja and Kaikhosrov. Let me state that our lives were enriched and augmented by their friendship. In this beautiful land of ours, the only aunt and uncle our children knew were Piroja and Kaikhosrov. In the preface of the Understanding of Gathas, the hymns of Zoroastrian by J. Irani and published by Zegni, Kaikhosrov writes, invaluable help in preparation of this transcript came from my brother Prof and my esteemed friend Ramrose K. Patel. Kaikhosrov for me. His friend, what more I can ask? What more I can ask? I'm certain that Zoroastrian must have opened the door of behest, or the heaven, or the house of songs electronically. Kaikhosrov, we are not mourning, we are celebrating your illustrious life with loving, affectionate, and warm memory. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ashwin. I am the son of Armati and from Rosmitar. We are all here to know Kaikhosrov as a brilliant philosopher, a supreme critical thinker, an amazing theologian, and a paramount and significant thinker of physics. There's not more I can add to any significance to any of those topics, nor will I dare to. Rather, I want you to know Kaikhosrov as I knew him, as a grandfatherly figure to a young boy, and helping him guide him into manhood. I was 4.5 years old on June 1971 when I set foot in this country. My sister was 1.5. And President Trump, AG Sessions, if you're listening, became illegally. Back then, we lived in Queens, and we used to take the subway to visit Kaikhosrov. And every time we took the subway, most of the times, I should say, you would see 1940s and 1950s plush subway trains. You had cushions on them, you had a ceiling fan, wood on them. Kaikhosrov lamented that Mayor Beam was ruining his New York. Kaikhosrov lamented, even more so, that Mayor Koch exasperated that. He was hoping that Koch would somehow mysteriously be assassinated. But that's okay, that's one of his lines. When my sister and I would go visit Kaikhosrov and Piroja, we would have the whole apartment to ourselves. We used to play hide and seek in the closets. We used to run around in his vast apartment and have Kaikhosrov or Piroja chase us. Right down the street from his house was this moved restaurant. If you remember anything about that, you would always know that Kaikhosrov loved that restaurant. So one day, I was like 19 years old, and I was having some problems in school. And we had like lunch, and he asked me, what do you want to be? What is it that entices you? I a 19-year-old, I had no idea. He said, for me, it was operatic and classical music. That's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be an opera singer. And my heart was, this is a man who knew Einstein, this is the man who did physics, this is the man who did philosophy, want to be an opera singer? He would have given up every single allocated an award that he received just to be an opera singer. Back in the early 50s and late 40s, when he was a young student in America, he tried out for auditions in the Met. Every single time, he was rejected, politely rejected. He wanted to say that his father pushed him into law. Well, everyone here knows that mom was always right. In this case, dad was always right. As a young kid, I was enthralled by music and stereo equipment. Tekku's palatial apartment was filled with Carver, Macintosh, Infinity, Paradigm, Bose speakers, every kind of gadget you can imagine for stereos. He would spend hours in his big leather chair next to the stereos, putting on the Sennheiser headphones, and just let the music flow through his body. So, I, as a young kid, went to the Irani School of Music Technology. He would tell me and reinforce to me, spend your money on speakers. Speakers is the way to go. I learned the physics of sound, the pros and cons of a vacuum tube and a capacitor. I learned the difference between a belt drive turntable and a direct drive turntable. I learned that there's a piece of garbage of technology out there called the DAT, digital audio tape. And it's a useless piece of garbage created by, and I quote here, this is one of his favorite terms, not only a genuine idiot, but a certified idiot. I called him up one day, just when I was a sophomore, I think, in college, and I said, I'm ready to buy speakers. Could you come with me? I don't want your advice. I just want you to be there as a wingman. He said, okay, come. So we went down to, I think it was a audiophile in 47th Street, 48th Street. And after some haggling with the sales rep over the price, I got my first set of Wharfdale speakers. I was so proud and so happy with that. But then it hit me, how am I going to let all this from New York City to Buffalo? Okay, we'll figure it out. I don't need clothes up in Buffalo. It was my senior year in college, and I went to Tekku's apartment. I was all excited because I had my newest punk rock Clash album, and I had a CD of Pink Floyd classical music. Pink Floyd is an amazing masterpieces of music. So I put them on. I put on the Pink Floyd. You listen to track 1. I think it was Comfortably Numb. After about 2 minutes, he stopped that and switched over to the Clash album. 90 seconds later, not even 90 seconds later, he shuts the whole thing off, gets up out of the chair, starts shaking his head, mumbling, I have taught the boy nothing. He walks over to just at the entrance of the kitchen. He said, Paraja, I failed the boy. Make me some tea. When I went to grad school, I was really amazed at the reach of Kaikhosrov. I had a professor. I studied international affairs, and my professor was Dr. Richard D. LeBeau. I had a question for him on one of the readings. Graham Allison, I think it was Rational Actor. And I noticed 2 books in Professor LeBeau's office while I was waiting. And they said Katie Irani. And I'm like, so when Professor LeBeau came in to his office, I asked him, I said, how do you know Katie Irani? And Dr. LeBeau just sat back in his chair. I said, how do you know him? I explained to him what we just heard in the last 30 minutes. And he smiled and said, when he was going for his PhD, he was his PhD advisor. And I'm like, I was just amazed that there's a connection that reaches me that is not from Zagny, but it's just out there. There were times that I enjoyed with levity with Tetonko, but there are times that he also tried to convey some life lessons to all of us. And I don't mean just my sister, myself, but I mean all the children of Zagny. He, along with our father, Ramos Patel, Lojikama, and the Boy Scouts of America, devised and created the Good Life Award program. The Good Life Award gives a solid edification of these Drushi teachings to all the children internationally. This program is a program that is going to live in infinity. As every child from here on out goes to it, they're going to learn the teachings of Katie Irani, Ramos Patel, and Lojikama. He had an extraordinary life. He had a gift for teaching and of reaching his students. He had a gift of making everything that was extremely intense be complex. And you could understand that as a kid of 10 years old. You could understand it as a young adult of 22. You could understand that as an adult of 42. He would go over to Gathas for the adult grade classes. He would go over to Gathas for the young kids and how it meant. Wherever he is, and it's going to be a great place. I think that today we have not just lost a critical thinker, a great philosopher, a theologian, a teacher, but we have lost a Renaissance man. Thank you.
I'd now like to invite another very good friend of Professor Irani, Lojikama, to speak on the professor's contribution to the Zarathustra tradition.
Okay, can you hear me, everyone? Sure. It's okay? Back there? Okay. Zagny President Asgard, fellow Zoroastrians, members of the city, university, community, and friends and family of Professor Kaikhosrov Irani. I wish to talk about the influence of Professor Irani on Zoroastrianism. I mean, you cannot really, in the time allotted, go in details, and I don't even have the research background to talk about his contributions. But I'll talk about some of the aha moments that came to me from talking to him and listening to him and reading his articles. All right, so this is what I come from. Now, to give a little background, Professor Irani's Professor Irani's story started a long time ago, as you have seen in the presentations of others. His father, Diksha Irani, was a Gatha scholar and had translated the Gathas, and as you heard, he was a profound influence on Professor Irani. And over the many years that Professor Irani grew up in Bombay, he had many discussions with his father on the Gathas and the Zoroastrian religion. And even his interest in philosophy was sparked by a book on philosophy given to him as a birthday present by his father. Now, you have to realize that Professor Irani was not a scholar of our stamp by living. He had a tremendous interest in the message of Zarathustra and was familiar with almost all the translations. And he regarded the Gathas as the core of Zoroastrianism, and the message in the Gathas as a groundbreaking event in the history of human thinking. He regarded Zarathustra's teachings as the first enlightenment in the history of humanity. Think about it. I mean, the first enlightenment was really 3,000 years ago by a prophet in far-off Iran. And Professor Irani had talked about this in Toronto at the North American Zoroastrian Congress there. With his background in philosophy, Professor Irani was able to look at the Gathas in a way that almost no one has done before. He was able to take the teachings of Zarathustra and show how they described a unique view of the world, and from which a way of life for Zoroastrians, and for that matter for all humanity, could be derived. The most detailed explanation of this is in part 2 of the Domains of Belief interview, which part of it which you saw in the presentation. This was done in the 90s, and actually it is available on YouTube. Just go there, type in K.D. Irani, and you will get that. So, this is one of the aha moments, okay? Briefly, the view of the world is where Ahura Mazda created the world, which has a spiritual state as well as a material state. Creation is viewed as good. It is meant to unfold according to Asha, the ultimate truth. Creation in the material state, however, is not in a state of perfection, having been afflicted by the destructive acts of evildoers and demonic forces, all inspired by the evil spirit, the spirit of falsehood, which repudiates Asha. This spirit, later called Reminiscence, is in opposition to the good spirit, Spentamaini, which works to fulfill Asha. And the history of human existence can be seen to be the conflict between these two forces and attitudes and choices we make towards the ultimate truth. Emanating from this worldview is the way of life for human beings. We are endowed with the good mind, Bhogmana, to understand Asha, the ultimate truth, and recognize the imperfections of this flawed existence. Thus, one can conceive of how the flawed state of things can be set right, that is, in accordance with Asha. This is good thoughts. When formulated and announced in the form of an intention, it is good words. Moved by the spirit of benevolence, Almighty, one proceeds to act, and that is good deeds. The form of society in which such goodness can best be realized is a society in which power is used in a holy way. This, the ideal dominion, is Chakravarya. When these ideal conceptions of truth, good mind, benevolence, and ideal dominion find actualization, then one will find well-being or perfection, and the spirit of the individual who has lived this way shall find immortal bliss. These are, this is how Professor Irani explained the teachings of the Gathas. In 2 short paragraphs, he concentrated all the teachings into this. And in the process, we talk about good thoughts, good words, and good deeds being the mode of operandi of Zoroastrians. But this is where he showed what these are the ethical principles of Zoroastrianism: good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. And he showed how these are derived actually from the concept of the Dhamesha Spenta. I mean, this was, no one has shown that to me, at least before, no one had shown this connection of good thoughts, good words, and good deeds with actually what is in the Gathas. And that to me is another aha moment. Professor Irani talked about the religion of stages of religious development. As a philosopher, he thought about it and talked about it. And development from shamanism to a more moral and ethical view of the world, and showed that Zarathustra placed his religion at this highest level 3,000 years ago. I had a discussion with Dr. Tersiantia, High Priest of Chicago, and I quote from him. The Zoroastrian laity hardly ever had anyone with his background explain the religion from an angle different from the norm. Nor do I know any other authornon or non-authornon, that is, priest or non-priest, who even tried to do so. That's what makes Professor Irani's contribution to our religion so unique. In 1994 and 1998, he published 2 books, very small books, Understanding the Gathas and the Gathas, the Hymns of Zarathustra. The first one was based on notes and lectures that his father, Dinsha Irani, had given from 1937 to 1939 in Bombay. The second was the yet unpublished translation of the Gathas by his father. And in both those books, Professor Irani has written a lengthy introduction, and in these introductions, he gives a gist of the contents of the Gathas and their teachings, which are worth reading in order to begin understanding the Gathas. And of course, as Prof. Patel mentioned, he contributed to the Good Life book. And again, there are sections in that book which also explain the teachings of Zarathustra in a rather simple way. And that, again, is his contribution there to the book. To Professor Irani, Zoroastrian rituals and customs were necessary but not the most important part of Zoroastrianism. For example, he respected and saw the necessity of the Navjot ceremony because it made us commit to a Zoroastrian way of life rather than as an entry into some special club. For the same reason, he respected the daily Pushti ritual, because by the ritual one commits oneself every day to the Zoroastrian life. And these rituals he regarded as a rational extension of Zarathustra's teachings. But there are other rituals. He could not understand the rationality of many other rituals and ceremonies. He was an open-minded person, and if anyone would have explained to him such rituals with rationality and intellectual honesty, he would have been convinced. This did not happen. Now, his open-mindedness mindedness made him open to change. He supported a less ritualistic and more ethical way of Zoroastrian life. He regarded the message of Zarathustra to be for all humanity. He was appalled by Zoroastrians who opposed this view and could not understand how one could prevent a person from converting to the Zoroastrian religion and a Zoroastrian way of life if that person was convinced that that was the way of life for her or him. In an article written by him in collaboration with Farod Wajifdar, they made a case for conversion of persons who wish to become Zoroastrians. Many of us remember in those who in Zagny, the Peterson Navjot, which was done in the New Rochelle diamond by Edward Scarcia and Hormazia. Now, he was a early and strong supporter of both these priests. He considered the Navjot a very good thing and was very happy that it was performed. Now, some people might, I think, thought of him as having very unconventional views, but even those people, I think, who did not agree with him, with his views, admired him for his knowledge and respected him. Again, in the words of Edward Garcia, his approach to religion will be much more appreciated by future than even the present generation, though it will not make him a favorite among the conventional thinkers. The fact that he knew well himself and did not let it affect his views and thinking. Now, one should not underestimate his influence and fame with the worldwide Zoroastrian community. And he was like a beacon especially to those who wanted to join the Zoroastrian community and who have joined. And perhaps the one of the greatest tributes to or one of the greatest moving tributes to Prof. Irani is when the Kurdish Zoroastrians heard of his death. They did this very moving ceremony where they put his picture with flowers and floated them. You saw that in the movie, and then they waved him goodbye. And so goodbye, Professor Irani. We will miss you and remember you always for the enlightenment you brought us. Thank you.
We have all heard about Professor Irani's love of music, particularly opera, and he may not have made it to the Met. We are very fortunate to have with us Tara Jamshedian to perform 2 arias. Tara.
I wish we had a pianist, but we're trying to make do.
play Haydn's Violin Concerto in G major, first movement. As you can imagine, we have received many messages and tributes for Professor Kaikhosrov Irani. And at this point in the program, I was going to read out some of the select messages. However, in the interest of time, I'm going to invoke executive privilege and will dispense with this item. We will be compiling hard copies of all the messages received, and we will also have them online, so you should be able to read them there. But just for the record, I want to read out the names of messages that I would have read out. Professor James Russell, Professor Stanley Insler, the K.R. Kama Institute in Mumbai, Dr. Ali Jaffrey, Faridun Karim, Dr. Jahan Bagli, Dr. Dolly Dastoor, Rohinton Rivetna, and Aisha Kalyan. We will open up the floor for anyone that might want to come and say a few words. But before we do that, I would like to invite a few people, if you could come up in the order in which I read the names out. Shireen Khoswari, President of our sister association, the Iranian Zoroastrian Association. Arzan Vadia, Vice President of Azana. Dr. Darius Antya. Zareen Austin, the new President of the Zoroastrian Association of Quebec, but better known as daughter of Rupi and Lauji Hakim. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Forgive my voice due to congestion. O Mazda Ahura, the wise and clever person, is the one who realizes the truth and is aware of the God's law by his thought. He protects the truth and purity through his spiritual power and will neither speak nor act except in truth. He shall try his best for the propagation of truth. Such a man or woman, O Mazda, shall be faithful to you and shall be regarded as the worthiest person for helping the people. In this final verse of Yasna 31, Zarathustra advises on how to live a truthful life in this world. Any person who follows the path of righteousness becomes the best disciple of God. Zarathustra also mentions that a person should not stop at just leading the good life, but should also spread the good to others around him or her. The perfect icon for what Zarathustra advises here was Professor Kaikhosrov Irani. He walked the righteous path, and he was a true disciple of the Ahura Mazda. Professor Irani was larger than life, and he was a brilliant thinker who had a special place in Iranians' heart with his progressive thinking and his open-mindedness. On behalf of Iranian Zoroastrian Association, I wish for his soul to rest in peace, and may Ahura Mazda give all his family and friends the strength to endure his departure. Ravanash Shad. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is a letter that I'm reading out on behalf of Homi Gandhi, the president of Fizana, who could not be here today. Homi Gandhi writes, "Dear friends, I regret that I'm unable to attend the memorial service in honor of Kaikhosrov, who I hold dear in my heart. Today you gather to remember a person who was loved by all and who will be remembered for as long as we live, for he loved us just as we loved him. Professor Irani was an exceptional person. He was kind and charming, generous and humble, proud of his heritage, and always able to connect with people on a personal level. Despite his vast knowledge of philosophy and Zoroastrianism, what endeared Kaikhosrov to all was his patience, kindness, and good humor, which he shared with his knowledge. He enlightened us on complex concepts by simply telling stories. My children, that is Homi's children, recall how his discussions on Zoroastrianism engaged them. He elevated their interest in our religion by taking its principles and making them real, showing how they relate to our daily lives. No matter who he spoke to, Kaikhosrov always infused his teaching with anecdotes from his personal life, all wrapped around in a charismatic delivery that simply made you want to know more, not only about the subject under discussion, but also about the man himself. Perhaps he didn't set out to be for it to be so, but every interaction with Kaikhosrov left you with a feeling of connection to a person who you couldn't help but think of as a great human being. Kaikhosrov's biography is well known and I won't delve into it. However, to me, he was an old friend and a mentor. He was one of the first persons in the Zagni community to welcome our family when we moved here. A passionate Zarathustrian and a supporter of our community in North America, his advice to me when I was Zagni president was invaluable. Even before that, I remember him coming to the Zagni board in 1986 when I was serving as treasurer to explain the concept of a new federation of Zoroastrians within North America. His lucid vision of creating a new diaspora infrastructure still remains in my memory. The Zagni board had no hesitation in giving him a mandate to work on building that federation, and Pirojain, he pursued the project wholeheartedly. Fizana owes its thanks to both of them amongst many others for its existence today. Zagni felicitated Kaikhosrov in 2003. After all the speeches by his many Zoroastrian and non-Zoroastrian friends were done, Kaikhosrov took to the stage and inquired, "What is all this fuss about?" These are things that happen at memorial meetings. And I imagine so it will be today, because sharing stories is the best way to remember those who are no longer with us. Kaikhosrov will always be remembered as a kind and charismatic Zaratustri, committed to his community in every single way. A few years ago, one of his students anonymously donated funds to establish the K.D. Irani Chair of Philosophy at the City College of New York. The Fizana executive will work with the Irani family in the coming months to commemorate Kaikhosrov's legacy in a suitable manner as well. On behalf of Fizana executive and the North American Zaratustri community, with my humble prayers and condolences to Kaikhosrov's family and friends, Homi Gandhi, President Fizana, September 9th, 2017. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today to pay our respects and celebrate the life of a very revered and dear member of our Zoroastrian community, Professor Kaikhosrov D. Irani. As I reminisce, I first met him and his dear wife Firoja early 1978. Soon after, we have moved into the recently acquired Arbab Rustam Geu Darbe Mehr at New Rochelle. They were very receptive and kind to the new Zoroastrian families recently come to the greater New York area. Soon after, Professor Irani started adult classes that consisted mainly of the parents of the children who would attend the religious class. He would select some relevant verses from the Gathas, providing the prominent ideas and concepts therein. Our dear friend Farham Rose Patel would make copies, provide us with copies of the corresponding translations and commentaries. Professor Irani made it more interesting by adding his knowledge of philosophy and religious thought. I got absorbed into this informative and rather educational resource, which sparked an interest and a curiosity to learn about our religion and its precepts. So every first Sunday of the month, about 7 to 10 of us would meet in the library room, adjacent to the prayer room of the Darbe Mehr in New Rochelle on the first floor. In 1994 or so, Zegni published Gathas written by his father, Dinsha Irani, and there he summed up the basis of the religion and its message in an introduction. I learned a lot from them. I would suggest that most of us should go through that. Professor Irani's interest varied from quantum and theoretical physics to theatre and opera to memory and decision making. I remember his telling us at one time he's attending a conference on neurosciences at either Montreal or Toronto. His knowledge and interest in philosophy ranged from his application or relation to religious thought or science and was extensive and intense. As previous speakers have laid out, it would be more than worthwhile and appropriate to collect and publish all his papers, publications on research, and those delivered at conferences, seminars, meetings, and publish this. These would be his legacy to us survivors. I am tempted to share with you some of his remarks and sayings, which sometimes I would jot down. He said, "Philosophy is not mathematics," implying that there are no equations to establish a proof. Then he said, "Faith comes in many flavors." He was tolerant and understood the importance of the community members would give to rituals, traditions, and culture. He believed very strongly that we should adopt the Fasli calendar, which is in concurrence with the Gambars or the seasonal festivals, and the Nowruz is on March 21st, also corrected every leap year as Ruz and Navzak. This is the same calendar followed in Iran. Professor Irani at times would complain about some Parsis in Bombay who would be offered by some issue raised from his speeches or writings. They would criticize his beliefs or assertions and then offer the sense of disapproval, dissent, and disparagement, published in the weekly issue of Parsiana in Bombay. He knew fully well that there has to be someone here who, as he said, was a not-so-well-wisher, who would forward the fodder of discontent to them. But after being annoyed and a little disheartened, he would ignore and forget these. He rarely spoke ill of or criticized any person, either whether co-worker, acquaintance, friend, or any member of the community. He was a very gracious and humble person. For the past few months of his life, It was not pleasant to see him physically handicapped, but still was sharp in his mind to correct some of my writings. And if someone raised some event or person of interest, it would spark his memory and recollect and reminisce about the good times, good old times. Towards the very end, it seemed he was tired and expressed some despair. He hinted by indirectly referring to his dear mother who would say, "God has forgotten me." I stand here before the assembly to pay my tribute to a great Zoroastrian par exemplar and to express my deep sense of respect and reverence. I raise my hands to our Mazda to receive him and accept his soul in the Garodimana, that heavenly abode of peace and bliss. Ashabnam Wangohoish Surao Sapintao Farvashyo Yazamaide. We reverently remember the good, the valiant, and the benevolent flourishes of the righteous people. Thank you.
Dear friends, Professor Irani was one of the greatest people I have ever known. I am absolutely crushed by his loss, especially since I was not able to say goodbye. I knew he was 95, but I wanted him to live forever. Sorry. I'm not really sure. He knew how much of an impact he's had on my life and the way I think about Zoroastrianism. I was just a young girl and my parents would bring me to the Darbar Mer in New Rochelle. My sister and I would attend religious classes, and afterwards I would peek in and out of the main hall or upstairs in the library where Professor Irani would be giving a lecture. I remember having so many questions about our religion and really trying to find the best way to incorporate Zarathustra's message into my daily life. The person who explained this best was Professor Irani. Not only did he explain the philosophy behind the religion, he always emphasized the universality of the religion, which was really important to me. He was an open-minded scholar who spoke with enthusiasm and clarity. He never tried to push his viewpoints on anyone. Instead, he gracefully presented our religion in a relatable way that you could apply to your life. And of course, he backed everything up with historical data. I remember him asking me to speak on a panel at the World Congress in Houston in 2000. The topic was Zarathustra's vision, and he casually mentioned that it would be a small panel. So I prepared an impassioned speech about how Zoroastrianism is a universal, tolerant religion, and that if anyone chooses with their good mind to follow it, we must accept and guide them, regardless of their religion at birth. Apparently it was very controversial, but these were things I learned from the professor himself. It just made sense to me. I showed him a copy of my speech just a few days before, and he said that it was fine and to go with it as is. Looking back, I probably should have toned it down a bit. When we got to the Congress, I saw that I'd be presenting at the plenary session. I didn't realize that it was the main event. I think he told me it was a small panel so I wouldn't get nervous. Delivering that speech was one of the best moments in my life, and Professor Irani was there to support and encourage me. He was a brilliant, kind, modest, and humble man, never forcing anyone to adopt his views, though he was clearly more knowledgeable than most. And let's be honest, he knew how to wear a goatee. He was an incredible resource to our Zagni and ICA community and has given us the enduring gift of his many lectures throughout the years. I'm grateful for having had the opportunity to know him and learn from him. I wish the younger generation would have had the chance to learn more from him. But just the other day, my 11-year-old son said to me, "Mommy, I want to learn more about our religion so that I can make Professor Irani proud." And that brought a smile to my face. Professor Irani's contributions to the world Zoroastrian community, as well as his academic community, are immeasurable. On behalf of the members of the Zoroastrian Association of Quebec, I wish to share that Professor Irani will be greatly missed, but fondly remembered in our hearts and minds forever. Thank you.
I'd like to now invite Natalie Gandhi for
small secret. I had a very small piece of paper in my wallet for the last decade, over a decade, and it had Professor Irani's address and telephone number scrawled on it. So everywhere I went, I had it with me, just in case I happened to be in Manhattan and could drop by, give him a call, and see him. And I did use it a few times. And why was he so important to me? How can I express? He was profound for so many of us, but he did provide a simple, elegant, profound, streamlined, beautiful, comprehensive, deep analysis and philosophy to undergird our religion. He did provide us with a worldview about Zoroastrianism, and he did that as a philosopher, and a particular kind of philosopher. He was at an American university. He was an analytic philosopher. So he worked in that tradition and was preeminent in it. So I wanted to mention that if you see a surgeon operating with very fine tools and wielding the scalpel, you could see an analogy to what Professor Irani was able to do with his capacity as a philosopher. Very best kind of philosopher you could see, and you can see his work in the life of our community, not just as an academic specialist, of course, but in how he has touched so many of us. So that is quite something for a philosopher, his impact there. And then, of course, we're here with when death has come, and cruel death, so cruel to take him from us, but it comes. And with that, with it striking, our eminences, our very grand people, our noble people, we get reminded in that of how we love them so much. And I was reminded of that with his death. And then I saw it wasn't just me, it was the next person, and the next person over, and the next person. Each of us had such a deep love for him. And in that love, we're united together as a community. So just in summary, I'll never go through Manhattan or see the skyline there without thinking of him and without thinking of the Zoroastrian people and community as well, and sharing that very deep love. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Alicia Glad, and I'm honored to speak here today in this beautiful building with the family and friends of Professor Irani. Professor Irani was so proud of this building. And today, I'm sharing with you that he influenced me greatly throughout my time knowing him. And even today, when Fran Rose invited me to speak this morning, I thought, Professor Irani knows that I have a near paralyzing fear of public speaking, and I have no prepared remarks. I am up on the stage because he believed in me and because he made my life better. He made me a better person. And I want to share with you, if I don't pass out, that it was just by chance that we met. Almost 20 years ago, I was assisting a colleague, was invited to help him have Professor and Mrs. Irani sign some documents. I was knocking on the door of the apartment, it opened, and it was like a magical scene. It was a movie scene with books everywhere stacked. It was like heaven, papers, and in every nook and cranny of the bookshelves aside the books and the files in order to just have a little area to sign. And of course, Professor Irani took out the most appropriate pen out of his collection to sign these documents. And it was just thrilling to me to be able to be in this world with him, to share his appreciation for things. He expressed to me in my first meeting with him about his family life, his history here coming to this country, and shared with me many of the photographs that he had on his walls. And I could see his love for his wife and Mrs. Irani's just affection, adoration for her husband. I was just so happy to have been able to have been in the right place at the right time, helping a friend. At the end of the meeting, he asked with Mrs. Irani, would you please represent us? And I thought, absolutely, not even giving a thought to the fact that my law practice had just started. I just run out on my own. But I felt his belief in me, and I believed in myself. And I know from today, hearing all these stories, that's a common theme. His love was just palpable. Visiting with him, I should say, business meetings with him were like visits, where I would bring chocolate eclairs. Who brings chocolate eclairs to a legal meeting? But it was like visiting with my grandparents or their friends. And after the business was done, we were able to have time to relate, to speak. Otherwise, there was really no point, because that was the point of life, to have that interaction, to share what are your passions. I learned so much from Professor Irani, his love of the opera, sharing with me all those magical stories. I heard a different story than the story today. We all know Professor Irani's modesty. I heard stories about lunches with Einstein and being in his circle of friends with all of the professors and walking across the quad together. And one afternoon after lunch, Professor Irani, and you can picture him with his goatee and the suit, and Einstein with his hair. I'm not doing the story justice, but Einstein leans over and says, so tell me about the theory of relativity as it relates to philosophy. And I just was sitting there, my eyes wide open and hanging on every word. Really an amazing story to have heard firsthand. Having those mini lectures that George described, I learned all about the guidance from the book that he wrote. He inscribed to me with telling me the history of his father's influence on him. And I just thought that was fantastic, because it's your family, it's your culture that makes you who you are. I saw it firsthand, and I was able to create a life around those values that he's shared with me, that he was able to bring into and weave into his life and his community. And you can see the love that he shared with his family and his friends. This is not a duty, this is not a labor, this is pure love. This is not an obligation today. Just want to leave you with this thought, that when we honor him, we honor his legacy. When we are kind, when we are generous, we honor his legacy. When we are charitable, we honor his legacy. When we pursue our passions, when we share a smile and a laugh, when we are patient, and when we are compassionate, we honor his legacy. Thank you. We will miss him. Thank you.
We will now open up the floor to anyone that might want to make some brief comments.
No, we can't hear. Esther, we can't get it on the camera.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is very personal. I have been very, very fortunate in spending hours with Keko. Going to Keko's house was a visit of ours. There'd be no topic left unturned. Hours of joyful laughter. He'd even demonstrate a fashion show with all his hats and caps and ask me to choose which looked good on him, which did not look good on him. He was a bon raconteur. I would call him a Renaissance man, and he would say, "What does that mean to you?" And I said, "You know what Renaissance is?" He said, "What does it mean to you?" And I said, "Keku, when you were made, God broke the mold." I have spent beautiful times with him, and so all I will say is his life was gentle, the evidence so mixed in him that nature might stand up and say, "This was a man." Thank you.
Hello, my name is Rosi Gandhi. Dr. Irani was a very simple and humble man. When we visited his apartment about 2 years ago with my daughter and my wife, and his health was going down, but his mind was very alert. So when we are leaving, I asked him, "What shall I bring it for you when I visit you next time?" And he told me, "Bring the fried banana." And that was his major favorite dish. The only regret I have that I couldn't bring it. But the Zagni and Zoroastrian community around the world lost a great philosopher and a great man, and his place cannot be filled up. Thank you.
I will be very brief. As we all heard, I would just like to summarize. Kaikhosrov Irani was an exceptionally gifted person. He was embodied with humility, modesty, and kindness. He will be sadly missed, but never forgotten. As a stalwart member of the North American Zoroastrian Association. We, the members of Zagni, the greater community over here, are especially proud to have known him in our congregation, and we owe him an everlasting debt of gratitude, love, and respect. May our Master bless him, and may he rest in peace.
My name is Rasta Bhakti. I have known Professor Irani since 1986 when I became member of Zagni. And I've been hearing a lot of his lectures, discussing with him over the years about the openness with which he embraces the righteousness of our religion. For the last 1 year, I've been visiting his apartment to discuss my views on using interplay of science and religion, which I believe Professor Green mentioned this morning about his views too. And the idea was to bring social justice on an interfaith level. And my first step is to break down the barriers in Zoroastrian faith from religious dogmas and rituals, which Professor Irani mentioned many, many times. A month ago, before his passing away, I presented him a 12-point proposal to bring unity and clarity on leading a righteous Zoroastrian life amongst all Zoroastrians in the world, not just one particular group. He said, "Rustam, that's what I've been pushing for the last many years. Go for it, don't stop." And then he passed away a month later. I could not continue the discussion with him, but I assure you that I will pursue it and follow up with several people to progress in that open-minded views that Professor Irani was proposing. God bless his soul.
my association with Professor and Firoja were that out of 35 years of my practice, they were my patients for 25 years. And the dental part of it would be like a 20-30 minutes appointment, and then there'd be 1 hour of discussion on whatever it was. So I always gave them my last appointment. And it was just amazing. When I came to this country, I knew to say my Shimo Yathavri, did my Kasti, everything. Did I understand what I said? No. We were told to pray and I prayed. It was Kaikhosrov. Gave me this book to read, this paper to read, this paper, till I learned. And now I have become that believer, which I want to pass it on to the younger generation. That when you say you're Ashembo, read the English translation so that you understand what you're saying. The Yathavaryo, every religious class, when you stand around that circle, say your Shimbo Yathavaryo and then read it. And if I can pass that on what Kaikhosrov told, I can tell you stories and stories. And the one thing that I knew was they both had sweet tooth. They loved European pastries. There used to be a pastry shop at the corner, and they would always go there and take pastries and then go home. When I knew that I was going through my surgery, so they came for the last checkup and all. So I went to the pastry shop and I said that, do you know what, so that girl actually understood and said, oh, that British man with that accent and that goatee? Oh yeah, I know what he likes. I said, okay, so give me 2 of each, whatever it is that they like. So I made that big box and I gave it to them, and Kaikhosrov tells, he said, Firoja, Yasmin wants us as her patient forever. The number of cavities and root canals I see in this box, look at the size of the box she's given us. And there was one on the music part. There was one diva that he was very friendly with. And she wanted to eat New York pizza. So he said, not a big deal. I'll get your pizza, what will you do for me? So she said, and she said it jokingly, that I will let you sing at the Lincoln Center, but it will be an empty hall. He said, okay, if you can do that, do it. So he got a big pie of pizza, and he said that I ate 1 slice. That diva had her pizza with a fork and a knife, and she polished up the whole pie. I could not believe it, that this is what they eat. So then what is he going to get in return? So she made an arrangement for him to sing at the Met on the stage one afternoon. And he said, I did it. Empty hall, I'm on the stage at the Met and I'm singing. And he did it, and then suddenly 3 people were clapping from the top. There were 3 workers in the balcony doing some work. So they came out and shouted, bravo, bravo. And he said, it made my day that I sang at the Met on the stage. 3 people listened to me, they shouted, bravo at me, what more can I ask for? And that is what they did. I took him once to talk to the school teachers of Long Island. They were having an interface this thing. And first I took him out, picked him up, I took him out for lunch. I thought I saw a very nice Italian place near Lawrence High School where the meeting was going to be. He said, why are we going there? So I said, okay, where do you want to go? He said, Friendlies. I said, really? Okay, so we went to Friendlies. And we had a nice lunch, then we went to school. The Zoroastrian was supposed to speak at 3:30, I think that was that time. He started at 3:30, it was supposed to be 15-20 minutes. He went on till almost 4:15 for this thing. And then he opened up the question answers. The teachers asked so many questions that at 6 o'clock the janitor came and knocked on the door and said that I have to close this school. You all are going to round up this with all the imams and the Buddhist priests and the rabbis and Jain priests. And he was the only one who was not a priest, who really took up the whole event. And then I drove him back home. And as he gets out of the car, he looks at me very mischievously. Yasmin, I enjoyed your date with me. I said, oh my God, my heart fluttered. I said, Professor, you really enjoyed the day with me. Oh, it made my day. He has told me so many stories. about how he would talk to the students in St. Petersburg in a basement because they could not be heard, and the students would all come and hide there and come and listen to me. As I'm sitting here listening to everybody, I'm thinking, oh yeah, he told me this, he had told me this, he told me this. It was absurd. Every time I would talk about Kaikhosrov Irani, my Aisha joked that, oh, you're behaving like Shah Rukh Khan came. I said, oh, he means more than Shah Rukh Khan to me. And that is what it is. But if I can carry on this thing, is give the English translation and pass it on to Arthur. I have started doing this in a very small way, but I wish it would be taken up by the dean of our religious classes to make it every time. That is the best way. That is how he made me. My mother always said that Zagni made me a Parsi because I was not Parsi oriented. I was a universal person. My mother always complained that a Muslim comes, a Vedic, there's no Parsi boy only. I said, no, they are all useless. I don't want them. But when I came to this, it was the religious classes and Kaikhosrov Irani who has really, I keep saying, made me a Parsi. And with Kaikhosrov, we have to now pass that on to our next generation, and that is in our hands. And that is why I only came up to speak, because I want to start this for the next generation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you all for coming today to help us honor and celebrate the life of Zagni's dearest and most beloved professor, Kaikhosrov D. Irani. You have all heard this morning about this amazing man who touched so many in so many different ways. As an academician, I would like to add that often in our CUNY circles, when people would find out that I was a Zoroastrian, their first response would be, oh, so you must know KD. George, you mentioned that you brought him up to speed with Facebook, etc. But I wonder if anyone had ever read to Keiko comments from his students on online rating sites like Rate My Professor. You know, yesterday as I was looking them up, I was absolutely amazed. These are comments from 2011-2012, okay? When he was lecturing at the ripe age of 89, 90. And you have to hear what the students had to say about this man. Irani is an amazing professor. Knows almost every major figure alive during his incredibly long lifetime, is lucid, precise, with a fantastic memory. Be prepared for old European pre-war teaching style. What are they talking about? They're talking about no fancy PowerPoints, just good old lecturing, and for them to be taking notes. Take the class to learn, not to get a grade. Other students say, a spellbinder, a brilliant, deep, encyclopedic, amusing professor. Somehow both authoritative and humble. He goes off on fascinating tangents, but there is a method to his madness. They always illuminate. He's not just a brilliant teacher, he's a brilliant man. Those who fail to see this haven't been paying attention. These are comments from students. One says, we all need to take Intro to Philosophy, so take him. He's the best teacher ever and knows how to make a boring subject not boring. He teaches philosophy in a way that is relatable to us. So there was one which said, might have been the funnest class. Well, you know, sorry, our CUNY students are not the most articulate, but here's what they say, might have been the funnest class I've ever taken so far. Another person says, he's so amazing, he's the bestest. Bit odd, Doesn't matter though, because it's amazing. You learn stuff, philosophy stuff, and more. You know, when you hear and when you read these comments and you see his scores of 5, you know that here was someone who truly enjoyed teaching. And yes, he inspired so many students along the way. Another feather in the cap of an academician is when one's student creates an endowment in your name. How many of us are ever fortunate to experience that, huh? As was mentioned, one of his students credited Katie's influence as so essential to his own achievements that he donated $2 million for the Irani Fellowship back in 1999. Incredible. Now, while most of us here at Zagni did not take Katie's philosophy or ethics courses, we were extremely privileged to have our beloved professor give adult religion classes right here in our very own Derbyshire. He spoke, as was mentioned, he gave us adult classes on Zoroastrianism. And as you heard early, you know, he was instrumental in putting together all these Gatha colloquiums and other conferences. But for most of us, no, rather I should say for me at least in person, I felt that it was his common sense and his ethical approach to Zoroastrianism that was just so brilliant. His wit and sense of humor added to his charm in making him an immensely engaging speaker and a great teacher. He truly simplified and made us think what Zarathustra really meant by our belief in good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. He was a unique treasure to the Zoroastrian community, and we are indeed fortunate to have had amidst us this great physicist, philosopher, teacher, advisor, mentor, and friend of our community. As an educator, again, it is mind-boggling to me that he retired from teaching at the age of 90 after having taught for 6 decades at City College. And I was wondering, what could have been the secret to his success? And all I can come up with is, I bet, just being around young people kept him going and was the secret of success for his almost centenarian. He was almost a centenarian. So I think that was the secret to his success, just being around youngsters, being around students who really wanted to hear what he had to say. What an amazing man and what a fulfilling ride. I would like to thank all the speakers and attendees here for coming today and helping us celebrate the life of one of the humblest and the finest members of a Zoroastrian community. Thank you. And yes, I've been told to pass the message that lunch is served, but before I do that, I know that From Rose had just a couple more words to say. Thank you.
As I have some responsibilities as Kaikhosrov's administrator, I want to thank all the professionals who has helped Kaikhosrov, starting with Alicia, Mr. Montel, Mr. Adam Wood, and Laura. Thank you, and we appreciate your efforts. We do not realize the important role Lavji Kama had played in bringing Kaikhosrov to the Zoroastrian world, at least the Zoroastrian world in this country. During the time, during Lavji's term, first and only term, Kaikhosrov appeared like a sun in the Zoroastrian community. Please recognize Lavji's and his contribution to bringing KDI to the Zoroastrian fold in this new country. Lavji, I'm waiting. Then, on a personal level, I want to thank my wife, Armiti, my little girl, who is not here, and Pashang. They have learned so much from Keku that I can't describe. And I was to say that his favorite food was tararu, banana, but somebody else mentioned it. I also want to recognize the role played by the three individuals, Sandra and his family, for looking after Kaikhosrov for the last 15 years. I know I'm richer because of him, and I'm sure you are. Remember the message of Kaikhosrov. And one thing I did not mention is this: if you want a brief history of Zoroastrian, if you want to understand the core message of Zarathustra, go to the last page of the Good Life book. Lavji and Kaikhosrov has translated Zarathustra's message in 1.5 pages. It was probably the best writing both Lavji and Kaikhosrov has done. Please do read it. If you don't have the Good Life book, Zagni has it. Once again, my humble thanks and gratitude for looking after Kaikhosrov. On behalf of the Irani families in India, from Piroja's side, I'm thanking you once again. Thank you.